Welcome back to the deep dive. So today we're going to try something a little different.
Oh, yeah.
Usually, we take this huge pile of articles and reports and we try to find the narrative. But today I'm putting on a hat, metaphorically speaking.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What kind of hat are we talking about?
I'm putting on my English teacher hat. Or maybe more like professor of diplomatic language. Because we're looking at a breaking news story from February 2026, this incredibly tense crisis between the U.S. and Iran.
Right.
But instead of just going through the events, we're going to decode the whole situation through the specific vocabulary the key players are using.
I love that. I love that approach because in diplomacy, words are never just fluff, are they?
No.
They're signals. A specific adjective, a chosen verb. I mean, these things can be the difference between a peace treaty and an airstrike.
Exactly. So class is in session. Our reading material today comes from BBC transcripts with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio. We've got interviews with the Iranian deputy foreign minister and some really compelling on-the-ground reports.
So before we, open the dictionary, can you just set the stage for everyone listening? What is the actual situation on the ground right now?
Okay, so the quick summary is, it is tense. Secretary of State Rubio admits that the nuclear talks are, in his word, complicated.
An understatement, I'm sure.
A huge one.
Yeah.
A second round of negotiations is set for Tuesday in Geneva. And President Trump has sent his heavy hitters Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner to handle things.
But at the same time, the U.S. just moved 2 warships into the Middle East. And Iran is. Well, they're warning that a war would be a total disaster for everyone.
So you have handshakes in Geneva and warships in the Gulf. It's a lot. So let's unpack this word by word. Our first vocabulary word of the day is a noun, envoys.
Envoys. It sounds a little old-fashioned, doesn't it? Let's look at a history book.
It does. But the distinction here is so important. Rubio specifically said President Trump's envoys, Witkoff and Kushner, are heading to Geneva. Now, just from a language point of view, why say envoys and not, diplomats?
Well, it's about hierarchy, really. A diplomat is a job title, it's a career, an envoy is a role. It's someone sent on a specific mission by a specific leader.
Oh, okay.
By using envoys and naming those 2 guys, the administration is signaling a direct line, a personal line, to the Oval Office.
So it's personal.
Very personal. These are not some low-level bureaucrats from the State Department. These are people in Trump's inner circle. It tells Tehran that despite all the aggressive rhetoric, the president actually wants to make a deal.
That context changes everything. Which brings us to another phrase Rubio used. He said the president prefers a negotiated settlement.
Right. Negotiated settlement. Very formal.
Yeah, in English class we'd call that a formal collocation. But what it really means is we really, really don't want to go to war.
It's a polite version. It frames the U.S. as the reasonable party. We want a settlement. But then Rubio used another word, an adjective, and this is where it gets really interesting. He said the talks are complicated.
Complicated, like a Facebook relationship status.
Exactly. But he gave a very specific reason for using that word. He said the U.S. is dealing with radical Shia clerics. And here's the key linguistic contrast he drew. He said they make decisions based on pure theology, not standard geopolitical logic.
Let's pause on that pair. Theology versus geopolitics.
It's a fascinating choice. Geopolitics implies a certain rationality. It's like chess. I want security. You want economic access. We can trade. We can find a compromise. There's a logic to it.
Theology.
Theology suggests something absolute. If your motivation is divine law, you can't really bargain with it. You can't say, okay, I'll trade you 50% of my core beliefs for lower tariffs. It doesn't work.
So by using the word complicated and then tying it to theology, Rubio is he's managing expectations.
He's preparing the narrative. If the talks fail, he can turn around and say, look, we tried logic, but they were operating on a different plane.
Okay, let's flip the dictionary over to the Iranian side. Their deputy foreign minister, Majid Takhtravanchi, he used a classic English idiom. He said, the ball is in America's court.
A classic sports metaphor. Tennis.
Yeah. And for anyone listening, it just means it's the other person's turn to act. You've done your part, now you're waiting. But what's he really signaling with that?
It's a bit of passive aggression, isn't it?
Yeah.
He's saying, we're ready to compromise, but only if you move first. And specifically, he's talking about sanctions, which he called illegal sanctions.
So it's a standoff. Iran is saying, you lift sanctions, then we'll talk. And the U.S. is saying, you stop enriching uranium, then we'll talk.
And until someone blinks, the ball is just sort of stuck in the net.
Okay, let's move on. Segment 2 of our lesson. This is where the vocabulary gets a little heavier. This is the military section.
Right. Because while they're all parsing idioms in Geneva, there's some very real hardware moving around in the Persian Gulf.
The word Rubio used was postured. He said, "We are postured in the region."
Postured.
To me, that sounds kind of static, like a statue posing. We're just standing here.
But in military terms, postured is a very active, very loaded verb. It means ready to strike. It means those warships are sitting there, fueled up, loaded with missiles, and ready to go.
Not so static then.
Not at all. Rubio justified it as defending against potential threats, so he's using a defensive word for an extremely offensive capability.
And Iran has its own version of that, right? The deputy foreign minister said they've taken precautionary measures.
Precautionary measures. It sounds so harmless, like bringing an umbrella in case it rains.
But in this context...
In this context, it means their missile batteries are on high alert. They're moving assets around so they don't get taken out in a first strike. They're digging in for a fight.
This leads us to probably the most dangerous phrase in this whole situation. The interviewer asked the Iranian official if the U.S. military buildup is an existential threat.
Existential threat. And if you are listening and you hear that phrase on the news, you need to pay very close attention.
Break that down for us. Existential, it relates to existence, to survival.
Precisely. In international relations, an existential threat isn't just a big problem. It's a threat to the very survival of your country. And crucially, in the military doctrine of many nations, including Iran, labeling a threat as existential is the justification you need to use any means necessary to survive.
Including the ultimate weapons.
Hypothetically, yes. Or at least overwhelming conventional force. If you genuinely believe you're about to be wiped off the map, the normal rules of engagement can go out the window. And the official's response was chilling. He just said if they feel it is an existential threat, they will respond accordingly.
And then he added that it would leave the whole region in a mess.
Mess is the diplomatic understatement of the year. He's talking about total war. The Strait of Hormuz closing, global oil prices going through the roof, cities on fire. It's a mess.
So you've got envoys and negotiated settlement on one side, which is the gas pedal for peace. But then you've got postured and existential threat on the other.
And that's the brake line being cut. It feels like we are watching two completely different movies playing out at the same time.
Which brings us perfectly to our third segment, the danger of mixed signals.
Mixed signal. And that's the exact phrase the Iranian deputy foreign minister used to describe U.S. policy.
It's a great phrase. We all know it. It just means getting contradictory information. And you can see why he used it. On one hand, you have envoys in Geneva trying to cut a deal. On the other hand, President Trump recently said that regime change would be a good thing.
That is the ultimate mixed signal, isn't it? You can't really negotiate a stable, long-term treaty with a government while also telling the world you want to overthrow that same government.
And it seems like that confusion isn't just between the U.S. and Iran. It's inside the U.S. government itself.
Absolutely. You have some, like J.D. Vance and sometimes Trump, who say, look, regime change has to come from the Iranian people alone. We should stay out of it.
But then you have someone like Senator Lindsey Graham.
Right. Lindsey Graham is out there at rallies with Reza Pahlavi, the son of the last Shah, and he's literally shouting to the protesters, help is on the way.
Help is on the way. I mean, that's a promise.
It's a direct promise. And this brings us to two very emotional adjectives that describe the protesters on the ground: emboldened and dismayed.
Let's trace that. So emboldened means you're given the courage to do something risky.
Exactly. So at first they heard regime change, they heard help is on the way, and they were emboldened. They took to the streets, taking huge risks because they thought America had their back.
But now the reporting says they are dismayed.
Dismayed. It means distressed, confused, usually because of something completely unexpected. And they are confused. They're watching the U.S. negotiate with the very same regime that's killing them in the streets.
A BBC Persian reporter put it very bluntly. He said they feel abandoned. They're thinking, wait a minute, you told us to rise up, but now you're in Geneva cutting a deal with the guys holding the guns.
That inconsistency, that mixed signal, it has a real human cost. It's not just messy diplomacy. It gets people killed.
Okay, let's shift to the economics 101 part of our deep dive. Because while diplomats argue over semantics, people in Iran are dealing with some very harsh numbers.
And the numbers are grim. The key vocabulary word here, obviously, is sanctions.
The Iranian government blames everything on U.S. sanctions.
Of course they do. And the sanctions are a massive factor. But what's interesting is that reporters on the ground say ordinary Iranians will tell you it's not just sanctions, it's also years and years of mismanagement and corruption.
Let's look at the math words here. A reporter used the noun free fall to describe the Iranian currency.
Free fall. Like a skydiver with no parachute. Total collapse.
And she mentioned inflation is soaring at around 60%.
Just stop and think about that. 60%. Imagine if everything you buy costs 60% more than it did last year.
Well, actually, for food, it's even worse. The report says basic things. Cooking oil, rice, chicken. They're up 75% in just 1 year.
That is simply not survivable for most families.
And the idiom for that is making ends meet.
Making ends meet. Earning just enough money to pay for the basics without going into debt.
And in Iran right now.
It's becoming impossible. When your currency is in free fall, your life savings just evaporate. You work all day, and by the end of the week, your money buys half what it did at the beginning. That's a recipe for revolution.
Which explains why people are on the streets, despite the incredible danger. And that takes us to our final and, frankly, our darkest segment. Human rights and the crackdown.
Crackdown, a word we hear all the time in the news. Government crackdown.
It sounds so clinical, like they're just restoring order. But the reality is horrific. The Iranian foreign minister was actually barred from the Munich Security Conference, which he called the Munich Circus, because of this crackdown. And we have stats on what that word actually means.
We do. Rights groups are confirming over 6,500 civilians have been killed.
And the expert in the source material made a comparison that it stopped me in my tracks.
The comparison to Ukraine. In the first 3 years of a full-scale conventional war in Ukraine, about 6,500 civilians were killed. In Iran, that same number, 6,500 people, were killed mostly in the space of just 2 nights.
2 nights? That is not a crackdown. The source used a different word. Massacre.
It's a massacre. It's indiscriminate killing on a massive scale. And that explains the next adjective we have to understand. Subdued. The protests have been subdued.
And subdued can mean quiet or calm.
But not here. Here it doesn't mean people are suddenly happy with the government.
No, it means they're subdued by pure terror. The reporter, Param Kabadi, said it perfectly. Protesters alone with bare hands cannot face a regime that is armed to its death.
It's the brutal realization of the power imbalance. You can be brave, you can be right, but if the other side is willing to kill thousands of you in 48 hours, the streets go quiet.
But not silent. And that brings us to one last noun that really stuck with me, the backdrop.
The backdrop, the setting behind the main event.
The main event was the anniversary of the revolution. The government was blasting celebratory music from the mosques, but in the backdrop, from apartment windows all over the city, you could hear people shouting, "Death to the dictator!"
So the anger hasn't gone away. It's just moved from the streets into people's homes. It's waiting.
So let's just quickly review our vocabulary list for the week. We have envoys trying to get a negotiated settlement in Geneva,
while military forces are postured in the Gulf, creating what Iran might see as an existential threat.
You have a dangerous mixed signal from the White House, which is leaving protesters both emboldened and dismayed.
And all of this is happening while the economy is in free fall, which led to a violent crackdown that has left the streets subdued. But the population is still furious.
When you string those words together like that, the story becomes crystal clear. This isn't just a political disagreement. This is a pressure cooker about to blow.
And the disconnect is staggering. You have diplomats in suits in Geneva arguing about nuclear enrichment percentages. Is it 3.67%? Is it 0? All back in Tehran, people can't make ends meet, and they're shouting from their windows at night because they're too afraid to go outside.
It really just highlights that massive gap between high politics, the envoys and the treaties, and the reality for the people who have to live with the consequences.
And that really gets us to the final question, doesn't it?
It does. So here's the final thought we want to leave you with. We talked a lot about mixed signals. The U.S. says it wants a negotiated settlement with the regime. That means a deal that would keep the current government in power, but just limit their weapons.
But at the same time, you have powerful voices in the U.S. government cheering for regime change and telling protesters that help is on the way.
So the question is, can you do both? Can you successfully pursue both of those goals at the same time?
Can you shake a leader's hand in Geneva while simultaneously hoping his own people overthrow him back home?
Or does trying to do both at once doom both efforts? Does the mixed signal guarantee that in the end you get neither the deal you wanted nor the democracy you were hoping for?
That's the question. And right now the answer is hanging in the balance, somewhere between Geneva and Tehran.
Thank you for joining our class today on the deep dive. And listen for these words in the news this week, envoys. Postured existential threat. Because once you know what they really mean, you really can't unhear them.
See you next time.
Class dismissed.